Up next on Nebraska Stories, running with a guiding hand. The diary of a courtship in the margins of a book. The timeless imagery of a Chicana artist and an amateur filmmaker's cosmic playground.
Best thing that I found for doing, miles, 800s, that'll be about 2.5 laps, obviously.
Ever since 8th grade, Alex France has had his sights set on running cross-country for Midland University in Fremont.
I feel like I recruited them. I was gonna come to Midland regardless. Half marathon's really like what I love to run, the long distance stuff.
And Midland wanted France as well.
Alex is a fantastic runner. For anybody to qualify for nationals as a freshman is a really big deal. And then for him to place as high as he did as a freshman was, awesome.
France distinguishes himself in one other way. He's running a path he cannot see.
2, 1, go.
At 14, France was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called retinitis pigmentosa, causing a loss of peripheral vision and, for most, eventual blindness. He has a type of distorted tunnel vision, unable to see details, but he can recognize silhouettes. That's how he makes his way around campus, monitoring building shapes and memorizing routes. But he loses sight of anything on the side, top, or bottom, struggles to see in bright light, and is completely blind at night.
When we look back, it really started when I used to play baseball. And there were times where I'd be out like in the infield and a fly ball would go up and I'd just lose it. So I ended up quitting baseball after my 5th grade year and continued playing basketball. It was probably about my 8th grade year, I started missing basketballs. My coach was like, what are you doing? Why didn't you catch that?
The diagnosis meant an end to playing basketball and baseball, but he could still run.
And then my junior year rolled around and I started missing stuff. I started hitting trees. I actually almost ran off the course one year. The very first day of summer practice, I ran into a fire hydrant. And I'd ran into fire hydrants before, but this one, I swear, almost broke my quad. I had the biggest bruise on my leg. I fell completely down. I practically had to limp back to practice. That was really kind of really an eye-opener as to realizing, okay, I really can't run on my own anymore.
Despite collisions with trees, mailboxes, even cars, it never occurred to France to give up running.
I loved running, and I'm an athlete, so I didn't want to, I don't know. It never came to my head to think to not run.
His high school coach in Omaha hired a guide runner to run with France at practices and during races. Tim Grummayer had been a talented runner in college, but didn't know quite what to expect.
We weren't able to practice together, so we kind of just jumped right into it.
Yeah, I remember we warmed up and you were asking me questions, but that was 10 minutes and then we were on the start line and we're all right, well, we're doing this, so.
The two quickly formed a bond and have been running together ever since.
My trust in Tim is immense. I know he's gonna lead me in the right direction. I know he's doing his best job. I know there's gonna be times where I'm gonna fall, and there has been times where I've fallen, and it's not because he does it on purpose. It's just, things happen. And I told him, I was like, if I fall, laugh at me, because it's gonna be funny. If you don't laugh, it's just gonna be awkward and it's gonna be a terrible moment.
The pair runs with a 20-inch tether, side by side.
A lot of it is based off of feel, what's it gonna feel like under the foot. Really not so much visually at all.
I run on his right, and I try to just mirror him as much as possible. So when his right foot is forward, my left foot is forward.
There are points where, yeah, I'll step in a hole and it'll throw us off my stride, but I think that's also part of kind of learning to run with one another.
We'll walk the course and I'll say, hey, this part looks like it's kind of tricky footing. There's kind of a dip here. Like, what do you want me to say? We just communicate through a lot of that ahead of time. That way I don't have to give him a lot of information during the race.
France is just as motivated with his schoolwork, earning a 4.0 last semester towards a degree in youth and family ministry. He uses assistive technology to do his homework, listening to lectures and audiobooks at more than 600 words per minute.
Their significance in the history of the New World Chapter 1492 dictates a brief survey of their culture and society. The Mexican began their rise to prominence about 1325, when small but settled on a marshy island in Lake Texcoco, the site of the future city of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Mexican Empire.
And Grunmayer takes his job as guide runner seriously.
Let's do our strides and sides to the work.
It's not easy, but he's very invested in it, and it's awesome to see. It's really awesome to see that dedication that one person has to another person's success.
On this day, they face their toughest race course yet, with sharp turns and steep inclines winding through wooded terrain.
Coming up on the left, around, left, 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 left. Keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight. Oh! All right, we're good, we're good. I'm sorry. It happened very quickly. We just turned the corner, boom, he went down, got up. I was like, oh, are you good? Yep, and we just retethered and went on. Boom. Right here, right here.
It was pretty hard. Like, we knew going in, it's probably gonna be the hardest race that we've ever done. There's a lot of hills and dips and like just bad footing everywhere. And like the way I can describe it is like it's like a strobe light for me, because when you're running through trees, the light will come in but then it'll go out. So it's like getting flashes in my face. So it's kind of hard to see. And then with the footing, it was pretty pretty difficult.
The fall left France with some scrapes, but he is otherwise undaunted.
Obviously, I'm going to keep running through college, trying to make nationals every year. That's a huge goal of mine. Once I graduate, me and Tim have talked about Paralympics. That's something that I'm really interested in. I know in 2024 they're in France, and my last name's France, so I was like, hey, that would be pretty cool if we ran, in Paris.
Whatever obstacles lie ahead, France is forging his own path with the help of a guiding hand.
There was close to how many books that you received from the Abbott family?
Sometimes a book is more than just a book.
I think it's interesting to try and imagine how that book crossed the distance.
It could also be the guide for a pioneer Nebraska family that was well ahead of its time.
It's made it this far.
Let's go back to 1870 in Grand Island, Nebraska, where lawyer and Civil War veteran Othman Abbott was courting Elizabeth Griffin, a high school principal in Iowa. An important piece of their long-distance love story was a book he gave her, The Subjection of Women by John Stuart Mill.
So it was a very controversial book. It was published in 1870 in New York, and that was around the time of people like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Carrie Chapman Catt. These people who work, in the United States were working towards advancing legal rights for women.
Othman and Elizabeth passed the book back and forth, using its margins to write notes to each other. It became a unique part of their courtship, a place to exchange important ideas. They eventually got married and had 4 children, including Edith and Grace Abbott, who later became leaders in social work and education. Othman was Nebraska's first lieutenant governor. The whole family supported equal rights for all.
They were very much in favor of equity and justice for Black people. And when they came to Nebraska, the new territory in Nebraska, they were equally committed to working towards voting rights and justice for women and children.
The decades passed and the old book faded into Abbott family history. It wasn't until Kathy began researching the Abbott sisters that she noticed repeated mentions of the book and the important role it played in the family and the fight for equal rights in Nebraska.
I thought to myself, of all of the books that they owned, why is it that they kept talking about this one book? And I thought to myself, it must have had special significance and importance to the whole family.
But where was it? Kathy had no idea if it even still existed after all those years. She contacted Carrie Stouffer, a curator at the Stir Museum in Grand Island, where the Abbotts were from. She had already searched the shelves of the research library there, but thought she'd give it one more try.
We made an appointment. She came down, and the first place we started was at the beginning with the card catalog.
There it
It
was,
was right here between these 2 books.
a 150-year-old book hiding in plain sight all these years in the Stir Museum's archives.
John Stuart Mill's The Subjugation of Women.
Still full of marginal notes back and forth between Othman and Elizabeth Abbott.
Right away we started finding, some very interesting remarks, although very faint. The pencil marks were very faint.
But it was obviously a discussion between OA and Elizabeth, just like all of the articles that Kathy had found mentioned.
It quickly became clear where daughters Grace and Edith got their passion for equal rights. It was all right there in the book, written into the margins and passed on to them from their parents.
He says, I will grant all equal pay, equal education, equal franchise, and equal duties.
The book isn't in great shape, but is still a treasure that will be studied by others interested in the Abbotts and their work for equal rights in Nebraska.
But he knew that it was going to be so controversial.
Students at the University of Nebraska-Kearney have digitized the book's pages.
It's really a wonderful experience. I teach about the Abbott sisters. In my own research, I work with the Abbott sisters. And so to kind of see something that is important to their early development, that's important to their later careers, and then also their parents specifically, and kind of the role of women's rights in the state, it is very much an honor to work with this.
It's a book with marginal notes from a bygone romance that lives on, decades after it served as a guide for a Nebraska family that led the way decades before women had the right to vote in Nebraska.
To know that this book was so important in establishing the foundation of the marriage between Lizzie and Othman, and that they made a concerted effort to raise all of their children, their sons and their daughters, to have equal opportunities for education and experiences in life.
The Abbotts are buried in a family plot in Grand Island, a final resting place for a father, mother, daughters, and sons who used a book to build the foundation of their marriage and teach their children the importance of equal rights for everyone.
I think Nebraskans can be proud that the influence of the Abbott family is still felt today.
A graduate of the College of St. Mary, Linda Garcia Perez had a long career as a children's librarian for Omaha Public Library. There, she not only encouraged children's curiosity, but also their creativity. Linda is also an artist, and it is through her art that she has and continues to celebrate her Chicana heritage. It was a flame that was ignited in her last year of college during a visit to her grandparents' homeland.
I picked Mexico, of course, so I went and stayed there, scared to death. And I got off the airport and says, oh my gosh, I've never seen so many Mexicans in my whole life. And I saw art everywhere. So I started looking up a lot of the myths and legends of Mexico. And that's how I became a storyteller as well as an artist. And you wouldn't believe that I wouldn't talk when I was younger.
A second-generation American, Linda was born in Omaha and raised in a family of 10 children. Her mother worked, and so Linda spent most of her time with her immigrant grandparents. Spanish was spoken at home, so when Linda began school, she struggled with English. But in that struggle, Linda found her unique voice in the world.
And I start crying, she would say, what? I got a stupid teacher. She doesn't know anything. I'm in real trouble. I'm never going to learn. I went up to my teacher the next day. I slammed that apple down, a manzana apple. And I had for breakfast avena, oatmeal, leche, milk. And I felt so smart. And I went and sat down and I thought, I'm smarter than the teacher because I speak 2 languages and see the world differently. So I knew the power of words then.
Though she struggled with English, Linda excelled in creativity. Art became a language that helped her build friendships.
All the girls had these fancy paper dolls. We couldn't afford them. Our money was super tight. I started making my own paper dolls. Eventually I had to make dolls for everybody. And I taught them how to make the clothes and how to trace it. So they put away all their dolls and ended up making paper dolls with me.
After graduating high school in 1964, Linda studied art at the College of St. Mary. She was the first college graduate in her family. During her trip to Mexico as a young woman, she discovered the brilliant, colorful art of her heritage.
That one exposure changed my course, changed who I am completely. Because of my education and the way I had looked at life, I saw far away that I had choices as a woman.
Then, back in America, Linda learned about a civil rights movement for Mexican Americans. It was called the Chicano movement.
Chicano philosophy to me means you learn about this environment, you learn about the other people that are in your culture and your heritage, but you teach it and you share it. That's why I call myself a Chicana, because it's self-determination. You know, you can't wait for people to hand you stuff.
She was confident. She carried herself in a very, almost aloof way, but it wasn't phony. And then one day, I said, let's go out. And I fell in love.
A chance meeting turned into a lifelong commitment between a very independent-minded Linda and Jose.
I wasn't going to get married. I made up my mind. I dislike the quote when people say, oh, my husband allows me to do this. What do you mean he allows you to do this? What does that mean, allows me? You couldn't do it if he said no? Not in my house.
She always produced who she was in her art. So Linda as a woman, as a human being, was almost a mystery, but when you saw her art, pow, it was all there.
As a librarian, Linda knew words transformed thought. As a workshop teacher, she fosters understanding through knowledge. And as an artist, she uses creativity to bridge cultures.
When I saw Linda do Mexicanism as a born-in-the-wool American, a Mexican American, a Chicana, it just blew my mind. Wow. And even though I see Mexican there, I see Chicano there, but I see something that's very American.
Growing up, I learned that paper was made from plants and trees. So I'm really dealing with a living thing. And I like that idea of working with a living thing that was once alive.
She's doing more paper art than ever before. She turned paper into magic.
For Linda, creativity is like breathing. And for those women who follow her, she believes the key to moving through difficulty rests with accepting the challenge, but not defeat.
And it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be fearful. It's okay to not know where you're going. But as long as you're going.
What drew me to filmmaking was when Star Trek came out and Lost in Space. They were such fantastic TV series about space.
Bill Hedges loves sci-fi movies, so much that he's built his own spaceship set in his basement.
I try to keep the upstairs fairly normal looking. I figured downstairs I can, go wild, and that's what I did. I bought this book called The Making of Star Trek, and it detailed all of how, everything about how Star Trek was made, all the behind-the-scenes stuff. It had blueprints in there, how the stages were designed. So I can switch from day to night in here.
Hedges grew up on a farm outside Lyons. As a kid, he came to town for movies at the local theater.
Back in the 60s, the theater was a popular place for people to hang out, especially in a small town. That was the place to go on, Saturday nights, because that was before there was television. People would get their news from newsreels. I got a job here as a projectionist at the theater when I was 13, and I worked here, through high school, which was kind of a fun job to have. My favorite film was The Absent-Minded Professor. For graduation, my folks gave me a Kodak Super 8 movie camera, and I used that to make some little shorts, a lot of stop frame animation movies, and that was the start of my amateur filmmaking career. My folks gave me this.
After high school, Hedges served in the Navy and worked in the Fremont Post Office. He kept making home movies. But in 1985, the Lyons Theater closed.
I hated to see it disappear because it was such a source of entertainment for me, and being as I worked there too.
So Hedges bought as much of it as he could and built a home theater in his basement as an homage.
I had a lot of beach movies, spy movies back then, westerns, comedies. Well, this is some of the things I had saved from the Lyons Theater. So I used to go through these very same doors.
In 2014, the old Lyons Theater building came up for sale. He bought it. In the last couple years, Hedges has turned the old theater from a place designed to show movies into a place to make them.
In Nebraska, it's just all cornfields and rolling hills, so I had to make my own alien planet here. It's an incredible playground for an amateur filmmaker to have the facilities to film anything here. I can have just to have the space to actually build sets and miniatures is something I could never do at home. This is my stage 2, and I built a ancient ruins set in here.
He's built sets for films he plans to make, including a new series co-starring his cat.
Basically about me and my cat and adventures in space, meeting other aliens, and it's going to be kind of a parody, not a serious sci-fi, but I have about 12 episodes written so far, so. To match between the different scenes, this is a miniature of me and my cat in there, which also matches the interior of that spaceship and also the interior of my set in my basement. Still got to add the plexiglass to the window, though.
He builds props out of all kinds of things, many of them scavenged.
My series is going to have a lot of parodies in here, and one of them is from The Good and the Bad and the Ugly.
But it's not all sci-fi sets.
This is the original lobby, and I tried
He's restored part of the building to how it used to be, even reinstalling the original film projectors upstairs. This building lets Hedges tie past to present, making movies in the very space that cultivated his love of the art.
Other people in town seem to appreciate it too, because I get people asking for tours of it once in a while, which is fun to talk to them too, because they just share their memories of coming here and they point out things that they remember. So it's nice to preserve a little bit of that.
And he's never lost his childhood love of movie making. In 2015, he created a film about the history of lions. Now, he's working on training his cat for his next project.
Okay, hop down. Okay, high five. He high five me, he'll jump up on my shoulder, so I'm trying to train him to come and stop, hit his mark. If you want to get a lot of views on YouTube, all you have to do is put a cat on the internet and you're automatically guaranteed an audience there. Cats in space, I think that's a winning combination.
Watch more Nebraska Stories on our website, Facebook, and YouTube. Nebraska Stories is funded in part by the Margaret and Martha Thomas Foundation.